Hello, everybody. Thank you so much again for joining us. We are stoked to be here. Um, as Amy was saying earlier, alt text is something that she knows she has struggled with. I know I have struggled with it. I still struggle with it to this day, but it is so important to do. And so I'm really happy to be able to learn from some experts here. Um, so this session is going to be recorded, and the link will be available for you to watch at a later time. Uh, Advance to the next slide and let Lyssa introduce herself, and hopefully our other two panelists, we can get their tech issues resolved.
My name is Lyssa Prince. I'm with Oklahoma Able Tech. I have been doing accessibility work for about 6 years full-time, 10 kind of not full-time. So I've kind of been in the space for quite a bit of time. And I'm really excited to get to chat with you all about alt text and hopefully demystify some of the things that may have been holding you up from creating image descriptions. Lyssa, would you like to turn on your camera and go and introduce yourself while we're on the slide?
Hello all, I'm Lyssa Largess over at State Services for the Blind. I'm happy to be here.
Right. We're so happy you're able to join us, Lyssa. I'm sorry you're having technical difficulties. My goodness, I'm having technical difficulties speaking. All right, and I don't see David on, so I won't have him, but hopefully he can hop on too, and we'll introduce him when he comes on. All right, so first off, I wanted to kind of, oh, my dog is right behind me. Standing up, and my dog has decided to be in a really inopportune moment. So my question to you all, just to kind of get you thinking first off in this webinar here, how do you access digital content? And this can be anything, kind of keep your mind open, brought it out. How do you actually access digital content on the daily basis for yourself? Okay, got someone said cell phone, computer. All right. What specific things are you using on your laptop to access that content, or your computer or your phone? Got a keyboard, perfect. Large point, which I'm guessing means large point font. Your finger, you're touching the screen, your web browser. So I'm getting some fairly technical answers in here. What kind of formats are you using for your content? Okay, got some PowerPoints. Audio. Somebody's real technical throwing in some HTML there. Cool. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. So YouTube is video content, video, images, audio, text. Perfect. All right. So this was a great set of responses. I appreciate y'all participating, but yeah, we have a lot of ways that we access content. So I kind of want to hone in on the things that apply to the senses. So what I have on the screen right now is a series of 5 images kind of displaying the senses that we have. So our ears, our eyes, our mouths, our noses, and our hands. So touch. So we don't all have access to these same senses. We're not all going to access content in the same way. In a lot of cases, we're going to kind of hone in on specifically audio. I listen to audiobooks all the time. Personally, I am constantly on the go. I'm walking my dog. Like I said, I just stepped on her, so I apologize to my dog down there. Walking her, doing things around the house. I'm listening to audio all the time. Some of you may be in that same boat, but there are some folks who really need that audio content just to access things, period. Those folks are folks who are either low vision, totally blind, or have a lot of other visual disabilities. So that's the group we're kind of talking about. And I really wanted you to kind of start thinking through what that experience may be like and kind of how that means content needs to be created so that it can be accessed. We're going to kind of talk really quickly about what is a screen reader. And since Lyssa, you're on, do you mind kind of talking through a little bit about what a screen reader is and how you're using it?
A screen reader takes whatever is on the screen. Generally, what it does is it just makes it into one long column and it reads that text. And screen readers then change how you operate your device so that you would use some other kind of input. For instance, by using tab keys and arrow keys or the keyboard in some other fashion, or different gestures on your phone. But the basic idea of a screen reader is converting the text to audio.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And which screen reader do you use in particular? Just curious.
Way back when, JAWS was one of the first. There were several others. It's made by a company called Freedom Scientific. Now they go by another name, but came around 20 years ago, or no, let's see, 35. So that's what I use primarily. I also use VoiceOver on the iPhone. Now there's lots of other options out there too.
Yeah, there are a ton. We actually use one called NVDA for testing. And we typically use JAWS, but I find JAWS is really difficult for me to use. I'm not a native screen reader user, and it actually has been fairly hard for me to learn. And I want to, kind of caveat that here too. I am not a native screen reader user. That's going to be Lyssa and David when he comes on. But there are tons of devices that that even have a screen reader built in. Like you have a phone, you typically will have a screen reader built into that. So on an Apple device, it's going to be called VoiceOver. On an Android, it's TalkBack. And on Windows, it's Narrator, but you also do have the one Lyssa mentioned, JAWS. So there are tons of these devices, pieces of technology that are built into your devices or can be installed into your device that can let you hear everything that's being interacted with on a screen. So thank you for joining or for helping out with that. I wanted to give you a quick example of what a screen reader might read if it's encountering an image that does not have alt text on it. So I'm going to play this video really quickly. Hopefully it works.
So I am in the PDF. I just switched to it. This is not a tagged document, so it will ask me how to read it, whether to read left to right, top to bottom, or to infer reading from the document itself.
To graphic, inaccessible document.
So it said to graphic, which is a number it gives it, but there's no alt text. So
this is an example of a document that was not written with accessibility in mind.
Okay.
So I am.
Didn't mean to start it again. All right, so you heard what that experience was like. The screen reader that David's using, and this is actually taken from a longer video. It's about an 8-minute video that's really good about describing a little bit more about what a screen reader is, like Lyssa just did, and then also talking through some examples on 2 inaccessible documents and then some accessible documents. So you can sort of see what that interaction may look like depending upon how well the content has been built out with accessibility in mind. So that will be in the resource guide that Amy mentioned earlier that will be shared out after. Highly recommend go check that video out. We just took a small sample here for illustration. All right, so what we want to do is try to create an equivalent experience for those who are not able to fully see the images that we're putting into all of our content. So we're going to talk through 3 easy steps. You can think of these like stepping stones, and that's what I have displayed on this slide. It's some nice stepping stones and a really pretty little mossy green kind of pathway. So our steps are: first, learn about the image. Second, look at the context. And 3, describe the image. So these are the 3 steps we'll go through and that you can kind of take into any image that you're looking at. It doesn't matter if it's just something you're adding to social media, a quick image you're adding like a logo to your Word document, or even a more complex thing that goes in like a textbook. So these 3 steps will at least get you to start thinking through what the image is and kind of figuring out how you can describe it. So our step 1, learn about the image, involves a couple of questions. So the first question really is this image a chart or graph? Is it a photograph? Is it a painting, an illustration, some other type of art? Is it an infographic? Those are used really commonly these days, and they have quite a bit of information in them, right? A combination of these. Also, just in general, what's actually displayed in the image. So we would kind of we'll go through on the next slide and kind of do that with the image we're going to use as an exercise throughout the rest of this. But yeah, in essence, like what we're doing is really taking a good look, like this kid on the slide is looking at a magnifying glass at this log. I hope he's finding some cool bugs or something like that. We're really going to hone in on what's in this image. All right, so let's do that to start. And Of course, we always want to make any presentation we're doing as accessible as possible. And I hope you've heard me kind of explain what I'm sharing on the screen for those who are not able to see it. But in this case, I'm going to really hone in on, you know, someone who is sighted actually taking a look at this image and seeing what's in it. So this is a piece that unfortunately just often cannot be done by folks who cannot see the image. So we're really relying, that's where they're relying on folks who are sighted to make sure we're describing these well, right? So I'm not going to describe this image. We'll kind of do that after the fact, but I wanted to get your input. What kind of image is this? So that first question that we were asking ourselves. And second, what kind of details are in this image? So I'll give you a few seconds to put some things in the chat and then we'll talk about it. Perfect. All right, so here are some of the things that have been said. Photograph is the type of picture. Looks like everybody's agreeing on that. Corgi sitting on a park bench. So people are identifying what type of dog it is. Someone saying something about the foreground versus the background, kind of. Dog on a bench. Somebody's talking about the tan and white, the color of the puppy on a wooden bench in a park. So we're giving a lot of really good detail. Someone saying small dog, light brown with white markings, red color with the blue shaped name tag. So you're getting very detailed about the things that are on the dog even, which is cool. Cool. Someone saying the corgi's panting. So that's one interpretation. That's interesting. All right, cool. So y'all did great. And this is the first step. Like you really have to figure out, you know, what this image is. So it may seem simple, but this is our first step. So the next step, or next part of this step, sorry, step one, learning about it, is we're kind of at this point just determining, does this image provide an important function, or does it provide important information or serve a function? Sorry. If the answer is yes, the image needs a description. The answer is no, the image can be considered decorative. So we have a conversation piece about decorative images a little bit later, but I wanted to at least cover the cases where, you know, we typically see folks agree that these images are decorative. Dividers that separate content visually a lot of the time, some decorative borders, some background shapes. Those aren't providing anything but maybe eye candy or visual separation. So a lot of times we can mark those as decorative, but I feel like about, I don't know, 99% of the time, and Lyssa and David might have some interesting points to make about that later, you probably need an image description, and it's actually going to be not marked as decorative. And of course, there are some considerations. Some systems don't even have an option to let you mark an image as decorative. So in that case, you always want to put an image description on your image. So that's the most important thing. All right, so basically this kind of leads into the next step. So we're kind of maybe unable to see if this actually serves a function or provides important information until we're looking at the context. So that's where we'll head in step two. All right, so in step two, we're looking at all the context around the image. So what I have on the screen now is a picture of, or I'm sorry, a screenshot of a newspaper, and it's called Frogville News. That's the heading. And then it has two articles kind of around the corgi image that y'all were just describing previously. Some questions we're going to ask here at this step are, does the image already have a caption? And that caption is the piece that typically goes above or below the image and can provide some extra context for that image, or maybe you have a witty little saying, or even in a textbook, just mark which figure it is. So there's lots of ways people use captions. A second question is, are the details of the image already described in a paragraph above, below, or around the image? Another is, where is the image in the content? So you may have a need to put different description on an image that's maybe at the beginning of a textbook where a person hasn't been exposed to any of the content, that may be a lot different if that image is placed at the end. So we're really going to have to make sure we know where this image is in that frame. Also, very, very important, who is the audience? Your alt text is likely going to be written, as an example, differently if you are somebody who is in, you know, writing for a student who's a kindergartner versus a 12th grader versus somebody who's in the professional world. So that audience makes a huge difference in how you're actually conveying the context of this image, right? All right, so we're going to take a couple of examples and look at the context here. So I have the same image up on the screen, and pretend these are the articles, or this is the article that would have been next to it in the newspaper. So our context is the newspaper, and we're kind of thinking through with now the context you're about to learn, how might we start to describe this? So the article is, recently a corgi named Steve has been hanging out at the local park and giving people hugs. What does a hug from a corgi look like, you may ask? Steve takes his paw and gently places it on the person's leg for a few seconds. We hope you can all experience a Steve hug. So goofy example, but hey, my dog actually does this. I don't know how a corgi would do it since their paws are so short, but it's kind of the inspiration I took. Anyway, so this article is going to have a huge impact on what we may describe in the alt text. So in this case, what might you think is important now about this image that now knowing what the context is and what that article actually says around it? What are some things that you would pull out that maybe you didn't before? Okay, someone said the corgi's name. Steve the corgi on a bench. Use Steve's name. Okay, interesting. A hugging dog. Okay, where his paws are. Add friendly to the dog's description. Happy dog. Okay, so these are all kind of, I think, leading towards the same thing, and it's that feel good part, right? It's the fact that this story was meant to, you know, elicit a feel good reaction from folks in this local paper. So yeah, we may want to call out, you know, the dog actually kind of looks like he's smiling. He's got, you know, someone said panting, and I know there's a lot of different dog science out there. So I choose to believe that this maybe is a dog that's smiling, maybe because I have my own animals and I want to personify them. But anyway, so the dog kind of looks like open mouth, that kind of looks like a smile. The ears are really perked up, just looking straight at the camera, just looks like a super friendly dog. So yeah, and someone even said that, I guess we were reading each other's minds, Terry, that Steve is looking at us. So yeah, that's, I think, is something you may want to pull out. So we're not necessarily going to get to the point of putting in any description right now, but yes, all those things you talked about are very important. And I think those are the things we should start pulling out for the alt text for this. If we do a different example, so we put a different article with the same image. This one now says, authorities are searching for a vicious dog attacking people in downtown park. If you see this deceptively cute beast, do not approach it. Save yourself. Okay, so same image, completely different context now, right? That has completely shifted what we may want to say about this dog. All right, so now knowing that this is a scary dog instead of a very friendly one, what would you think was important about this image to pull out and put into the alternative text? Okay, one says the size of the dog, deceptively cute dog, okay. Cute, dangerous dog. Yes, Rochelle, okay, you're reading my mind here. Description of the dog, that is going to be the absolute priority here. So of course, this is a much more fun example than if we were to have talked about somebody who is maybe someone who's escaped from jail and is dangerous. But you typically see in those kinds of articles that they're describing the exact look of the person, how tall they are, what the color of their skin might be, how old they may look, all of those kinds of things, what their hair looks like. So that's what we would want to do for this dog too. So it's very important, especially since the article does not contain any of those details, that we are able to give that same experience and make sure that someone who is accessing this content via screen reader and not visually seeing it can, in fact, know how to warn someone that they love who's going to this park about this dog. So that's absolutely what we would do. So some people are pointing out like red collar. Perfect. All right. So now you're kind of also seeing how the interplay between the context and the alt text or the text description, I'm sorry, the image description might work. There's a lot that goes into this. And that's why we haven't gotten to the point of describing it. We're going to get to that now. I really want you to think about this holistically. It's not just that an image needs alternative text, which I'll fully describe here in a bit. You're probably like, well, you haven't really described this. What is an image description versus alt text versus all of these other things? I'm kind of using them interchangeably, and there's a reason for that. But I really want you to think about this holistically. Think about what the best way to describe the image is using the tools that you have at your disposal. Some tools are that alt text that I've kind of been referring to. Some are the caption, some are surrounding content, and there's a lot that can go into that surrounding content. We'll expand on that as we go through here in a minute. But we're going to focus in on the alt text right now. So assume on these pictures that we could do nothing but change the alt text. The articles were set. Maybe we had a fussy editor and they didn't want us to add any more detail about the image. And we only have alt text at our disposal. That's the tool we're going to go with. So what is alt text? Alt text is a description of the image that is attached to the image at the code level. So if you look to the right, there is a picture of what it looks like when an image hasn't loaded, and it's got text that says this is an alt text. So all this is, and you may have seen this, if you've ever had an internet connection that was slow, or a web page that just wasn't loading properly, this is what happens. If there's no alt text, then you just basically get a little broken image link or image icon, sorry, and then there wouldn't be anything there. So you'd be getting a similar experience to someone who probably encounters this every single day, that there is no alt text. So that's what's there on the screen. These have to be added. These are not just gonna come along with an image. So if you're adding things to social media or documents, PowerPoints, etc., you have to add an alt text description to those images. One big tip we have is to kind of keep this to 200, I say this wrong every single time, 250 characters or less. So for any of you who did Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, think of it like a tweet, right? It's better to keep this as short as you possibly can, and not be too overly verbose. But I know Lyssa's got some things to say about that, and we'll cover that here in a little while. All right, so step 3, describing the image. We're kind of going to go through the examples we had and cover those one by one, and actually put on an alt text description on each of those images. So first off, we have the article about the nice huggy dog named Steve. We're going to describe that potentially using this option. So again, this is, you'll hear us say this a few times, but creating alt text is an art. It's not a science. So you may completely disagree with what I've chosen to put in as this alt text, and that's okay. But what I chose for this particular image is Corgi sitting on a bench looking right at the camera with an open mouth that looks like a smile. So that is describing that feel good piece that we're talking about. And again, while you may disagree with me, a lot of you were kind of talking about those same things. So Lyssa, David is on, and I'm glad you were able to join us, David. Do you like the way I described that, knowing what you know, or could I have done something different?
Well, you could probably, edit the words a little bit so it was shorter, but yeah, you're conveying the right idea.
Gotcha.
And ideas. And I apologize for being late. It was a nightmare getting on. We won't go into that.
Well, we're really happy for you to have showed, been able to make it on. So, and we're going to get to hear a lot from you later. And do you want to introduce yourself while we're here?
Well, my name is Dave Andrews. I'm Chief Technology Officer for State Services for the Blind in Minnesota, and I've been working in accessibility and assistive technology for many, many years.
We're happy to have you here. All right, so I appreciate that feedback, and I will take it and run with it. And I also, I'm glad that you found fault with it. That was perfect. So this is exactly what we were looking for. So yeah, I probably could have been a little bit less wordy, but I'm glad to hear that the sentiment was there. And again, I think that's what you're going to hear from us over and over again. If the sentiment, the meaning's in the right place, then you're probably doing a good job. Oh, and I've got someone saying the word right could be confusing. Yeah, absolutely. So this is all up for interpretation, right? So, and this isn't meant to make you more scared of writing alt text. It's basically just that this is kind of a conversation, and it's tough, but as long as you're sort of getting the idea right, thinking through your context, you're likely going to get at least pretty close to what would be perfect, right?
Hey, Lyssa, this is Amy. Can I chime in a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
We had someone mention in the Q&A, should we assume that people know what a corgi looks like?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So Dave or Lyssa, would you want to jump in on that one? I'm happy to.
This is Dave, I would give a little detail because I have an idea in my head what a corgi is, but it could be completely wrong. And you could just say Queen Elizabeth's dog. Wasn't she a big corgi person?
She was, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Dave on that. Not a lot of words are needed, just colors, pattern. And then that's useful information. Now I have a better idea what a corgi looks like.
Awesome. So we might have changed that to say something more like a corgi, which is a dog with short legs and this kind of coloring, and the type of ears or something, sitting on a park bench, and then kind of doing the thing where I edit out some of the words too. That would be better. Dave or Lisa?
I'm sorry, something went in the chat, which
Oh,
she
wait.
said small brown and white dog, which is kind of what you want to say.
There we go. Okay. I like it.
Lyssa, this is Courtney. There was
Mhm.
another comment in the chat, someone asking, shouldn't we add photo of to the description? Just wanted to make sure you saw that.
I did, and I was going to get to it here shortly. So you were leading me right where I needed to go. Appreciate it. Absolutely don't need to add photo of in there. So if you think back to the video clip in it, it actually said graphic. So the screen reader is going to announce that it's a graphic. So it's not absolutely necessary, and sometimes it's really redundant. But if it's important for the context, so this is, and I don't know if you noticed, Amy and Courtney were wearing shirts that said "it depends." They made those shirts specifically because we say this all the time in the accessibility world. So Amy's showing her shirt off for us now. Hashtag Allie, it depends. So there are some cases where it probably is a good idea to call out that it is a specific photograph. Like sometimes we do a lot of training and I'll put in screenshots. So a lot of the time I'll write screenshot because that is telling a little bit more about the image than graphic. But Dave and Lisa, I'd love to hear your perspective too.
This is Lisa. I'll say sometimes the Atlantic uses illustrations a lot, and they're very clever, very well done, and so it's useful to hear illustration of blah 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 blah. But in general, in a situation like this, the assumption is that it's a photograph, and the context would indicate that it's a photograph and not a painting or an illustration or something like that. So I especially when the context would make it clear that what type of image it is, it's words you could leave out.
I would agree. I mean, I think for the most part, it isn't needed. There are specific cases where it would be helpful to know it was a picture or a chart or a painting or whatever.
Yeah, this is tough. Were you going to say something else, Dave? I don't want to
Oh,
override.
well, there was a thing in the chat about picture descriptions that are too clever. What's our opinion? Well, that's pretty subjective. I think there's a balance. You can edit too much and be too short, and when you're reading it with your screen reader and the words are coming at you, there might not be enough words to really have the time to process it. On the other hand, if you have too many words, that's just as bad. So, it comes back to that. It depends on why it's an art, but I think as you do it more, you'll get a feel for it.
I agree. I appreciate the appreciate the extra context there. I was hoping you would see that or hear that and respond to it, because I'm like, honestly, that's one I wouldn't really know. I was really looking forward to your response, Dave, so I appreciate it. All right, so let's move on to the next example. And we can see, so this example would have been the one that had the vicious dog article next to it. So what we chose to describe this one as is actually it's up for debate, obviously. So we actually did say photograph in this one. And full disclosure, I didn't write this one, and I'm gonna take this feedback to whoever did write this on our team. But photograph of the vicious dog, a corgi that has a light brown tan coat with white muzzle, paws, neck, and chest. It has dark brown eyes and attentive ears. It has a bright red collar with a white paw print design and a blue bone-shaped identification tag. So thoughts on that one? How did we do?
This is Dave. Except for the photograph of, I think it's great. I don't know if I see the need to say photograph of. but the rest of it tells you what you need to know.
Okay, perfect. And I would agree that we should have taken photograph out, because I liked what Lyssa said and how she described it. It's already kind of in the context of the article and the image and all of that. So I think that's kind of repetitive, right? Any other feedback?
This is Lyssa. No, I agree. I think it's it shows that in this instance, using all of that extra detail is important, and there's value in it.
Perfect. So you hopefully by this description, it sounds like we did a pretty decent job. Like somebody would be able to say, you know, I'm thinking like of a person who's blind and likes to take their kid to the park. They have the exact description that they need and could say, hey, look out for this dog. You know, it looks exactly like this. This is the collar. So I'm glad to hear that we were successful in that. And that was the intent of that image, right? Was to give people an idea of what to look for. So you don't go approach this deceptively cute dog and accidentally get bitten or chased or whatever it happens to be. All right, we have a question. If the detailed description in the newspaper is in the newspaper article, would you also include it in the alt text?
That's a good question. If the newspaper article covers it, yeah, it's great to do it in the material, in the body of the text. But if there's things that the picture is showing that the words don't cover, then you would need to include that in the alt text. But it's always preferable to cover something in the content itself.
Mm-hmm.
This is Lyssa. Yeah, so if it's already in the text, the color of the dog, the description of the collar, and then if you repeat it in the alt text, then it's just wasting my ears.
I like that, wasting your ears. Yeah, so we definitely don't want to be repetitive, is what it seems like. And then we also maybe prefer to have things in the context. And we actually have a case. It's like you guys were all reading my mind anyway when I was building this presentation out. So we'll actually have an example where we kind of go through and see what the alt text could look like if the description of the image is in the content. So we'll keep going here. I think maybe
there was a thing in the Zoom in the chat about logos, and
yeah,
personally, here again it depends, but normally you would just say Amazon logo or Google logo, and that's enough. But maybe it was an article about design or something, so you would want to describe the logo in more detail. But that is this in general is a place where you would say logo and not leave that out, and not just say Amazon, because that would be too marooned by itself.
Yeah, I agree. So Amazon logo would have been accurate for that, for the typical case, unless it's maybe like a design kind of document where we're talking about like what the logo looks like specifically. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's what I was making sure. Good questions. Y'all are asking great questions. So I feel like we're going to run out of time if we answer all of them. So that's okay. We'll just not have a Q&A at the end. We'll do questions during. All right. So the last thing we're going to talk through with describing images is basically when you need more than alt text. And I was kind of pretending again in that case there that all we had was alt text. And you may run into that when you have, like I said, an editor that's maybe pretty sticky and doesn't want to have his article, changed up. Maybe all you have is alt text. So you kind of work with what you have, but like Lyssa and Dave agreed, seems like it's better to have it in the content. So we do want to do that if we possibly can. And if we have control of the content, we have a lot more tools. So let's talk about what other tools we kind of have in our toolbox. We'll talk about 3 different methods to kind of cover how that could look. So method 1 is use the surrounding content plus a really short piece of alt text. So this is actually exactly what we were just talking about a second ago. So this is actually a picture of a peacock, just from the head neck up kind of. So it's a male peacock. They're very, pretty. They have some decorative stuff. I don't even know what the thing is that comes out the back of their head that's got little feathers on it, but it's called the crown, I guess. I should just read what's in front of me. Anyway, so the context of this image is that it's got the context is an article, and it says the male is metallic blue on the crown, the feathers of the head being short and curled, the fan-shaped crest on the head is made of feathers with bare black shafts, and tipped with blush green webbing. A white stripe above the eye and a crescent-shaped white patch below the eye are formed by bare white skin. The sides of the head have iridescent greenish blue feathers. The back has scaly bronze green feathers with black and copper markings. So they've done the whole description in that particular piece of content. So you would put alt text on this image and all it would have to say is male peacock head. This was an example that was I took directly from the W3C accessibility web pages. So they're the folks that created the internet and govern the internet, and they have a really good set of resources. So those will also be linked in the resource set that we send out. But this is exactly the case we were talking about. All right, so second method would be if you have like a graph. In this case, we kind of have a graphic, but charts, graphs, line charts, pie charts, all those kinds that you can think of fit really well into this case too. So this was actually something we took from the University of Oklahoma website. And this is on Oklahoma climate divisions. It's a map of Oklahoma split into the 77 counties, and they're all kind of split, or sorry, it's further split into the divisions. There are 9 of the divisions. So they're kind of blocked off and labeled by which division they're in. So that would be a lot of alt text. And if we're trying to keep it short and sweet, it's likely we probably need something else to go along with the alt text. In this case, a table makes sense, right? Because it's just a list of the divisions with the counties in them. So they had a table listed right below this image. So we have a climate division column and a counties column. And in the first one, I'll just list it out. It says 1 Panhandle. So that's the first division. It's called Panhandle. And it's got the counties Beaver, Cimarron, Ellis, Harper, and Texas. The alt text, all you'd have to do is put in a map of Oklahoma divided into its 9 climates divisions. The table below lists the counties included in each climate division. So this is a very good example of using a table to supplement and describe for you. And likely also it's going to help people who don't know all the counties. It's also going to help folks who maybe have some cognitive disabilities, and even some people that may have some issues with color. There may be some color issues on this particular map. So, you know, we're kind of dealing with what we have here. But yes, this is another example that would be another tool in your toolbox. So Dave or Lisa, do you have any other tips on something like this, like a chart or graph, and using a table below it, or any good examples you can think of that have been done really well?
You know, the table works well. I remember back in the 90s, you know, we're a part of the workforce department here in Minnesota, and they had a map of all the workforce centers around the states, and they were just graphic spots, and you were supposed to click on it. And anyway, we suggested that they list the sites in a table with links, and it worked really well.
I've heard horror stories of those image maps. Those were kind of gone by the time I got into the field, I think. But yeah, I imagine those were pretty terrible for screen users. Oh boy. Lisa, would you like to point out anything specific? Or
especially with maps, these kinds of things are fantastic. But again, just a shout out here in Minnesota during COVID, the Department of Health did a really great job updating, you know, with the COVID numbers every day, as so many health departments did. But whoever was responsible for the alt text would do the tables every day so that you could pop them out and read them with the screen reader. And like, you know, at the time that was just incredibly useful. Ton of work, but really helpful.
very cool. Well, sometimes it is a lot of work, and I think the next example will really cover that too. I don't actually, we don't have it all laid out, but you'll kind of see it can be a lot to describe these, but it's obviously something that we need to do, and we need to make sure and plan for when we're putting together any piece of content and think about it that holistic way. So our third method here, which is similar to the last one, and that's providing some extra information, but maybe in a different way. This is a Toronto subway map. So subway maps are hard. I think they're hard to create, they're hard to describe, they're hard to all of the things. But what we would recommend in this case is to have kind of if this is on a web page, for instance, you've got this web page here, you can either have it completely described below it, or if you want to have a link to it, it goes to a separate page that has the entire description in text. So you can use headings, list, all those kinds of things, and you're basically describing the stops and the order that they go in and kind of the connection points. So there's several things to think about here. So in this case, what I have on the screen is the map itself. There's a link below it that says Toronto subway map long description. And that's something you would click out to and go to the separate description. So I'm not necessarily going to show that today. This is actually kind of a teaser because I really wanted to get to the questions that we have for Lyssa and Dave here in a minute. But this is actually an example we have in our Oklahoma Able Tech course catalog. It's a course on complex images. And if you want to see kind of how we described it, and again, this is all up for interpretation, but that is there in our course. And I would highly recommend you go take that. It kind of talks through the framework I've talked through and gives you some examples here. And this is one of them. But the alt text for this, all it would say is Toronto subway map. See the link that follows for a long description. So we don't have to fully describe it here in the alt text at all. We're just kind of, passing it down to where the long description is happening. So I think, Lyssa, what you were saying is save your ears or something like that. I think that's what we would want to make sure and do here. All right, so those are some other tools you can add to your toolbox. So alt text is not everything. In fact, the context around it and those things that you can use to supplement these, especially these complex images, it's really, really important that you do that where you can and not just rely on alt text. Because alt text is, it's great, but it's not everything. All right, so now you've got the framework in mind. You're ready to go describe some images. And we have a lot more conversation that we can have, and that's kind of where we're headed. But I want you to keep in mind that you have all those steps in your at your disposal, all those tools at your disposal as you're thinking through the next image that you're wanting to describe. The next thing we're going to do is cover some what we're calling sticky situations. So I've got a spider web picture up here. We don't want to get caught in this web here. We really want to make sure and try to, think through how we best describe these things in the cases that are a little bit strange. So this is where I'm going to kind of pass it to Lyssa and Dave, and I'll ask them some questions. And we'll talk through some of these that we get asked all the time, and they're a little bit harder to figure out maybe. So the first one is, how much detail would we use to describe the women in the picture? Do we describe race, ethnicity, gender, age, style of dress, etc.? So, and to give you an idea of what's on the screen, there are two women. One's quite a bit younger than the other. They are Latina. And they have what's on a computer with some headphones on. They look like they're both pretty happy to be on the computer. So that's what we've got going. How much? Amy's doing the it depends again. She's showing off her shirt. It's amazing. All right, so I would love to hear from you all what you would prefer for this particular case.
Well, she's right. It does depend. I mean, if the website or the article's about DEI, you may want to mention race or ethnicity or whatever, or if there's some other point you're making. But if it's just decorative and pictures of people to have pictures of people up there, then I would say no. So say what you need to say, but don't say any more.
I love it.
This is Lyssa, and this is something I think over a lot. We had a conversation about this as we were getting ready for this webinar, and one of the things I mentioned is that we tend to think that people look like me, right? And so it's sort of, if I hear text that says two women working on a computer, I'm probably default to sort of imagining that they're people who are white like me. In a predominantly white culture, that's something we might do. And so in general, maybe including skin tone. I mean, I don't know what the references are, Lyssa, that makes makes you assume that these women are Latina.
Mhm.
But what is it that your eye is seeing? Is it skin tone? Is it so?
Sure.
Whatever those descriptors are, maybe including those, and maybe being consistent about that too. So if somebody it has a lighter skin tone, to include that, so that there isn't a default. And again, I realize that adds language, right? It adds verbiage, and that's complicated. But in general, lately I've sort of landed more on the side of including those kinds of details. And of course, it depends.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you called me out for that. See, this is why I was really excited to have this conversation. I assumed they're Latina, but I should have actually described them more to you as the skin tone. They have a darker skin tone, medium light brown. And I know the folks that do our social media, that's actually one of the recommendations they have. So they have kind of some guidelines they've written for themselves on sharing a lot of our success stories for Able Tech, and that is one of those things, kind of describing skin tone rather than making any assumptions about where they may be from or what their nationality is or anything like that. And I think that's great, but I don't know how to sum up what you both said, because the depends thing came back up. But yeah, I think it's really important just to think through the case that you're using, and maybe do a little bit of describing, don't go overboard. But also if it's something about inclusivity, like Dave said, it might be more important to kind of give a little more detail. Yeah, and then someone saying there's the gender they might appear to be in their identity, which could be different. Absolutely. So we definitely don't want to make any assumptions there. 100%. Great. Okay.
Lyssa,
Yes.
this is Amy. I just want to chime in quick. I'm seeing that we're getting close to 5 minutes here left. If the panelists are able to stay on a little bit longer, I would vote that we continue on. And for folks who need to hop off right at the top of the hour, they could refer back to the recording to see what they missed. Is that okay with the rest of the team?
Yes, I'll stay for an hour to miss what I missed, or to make up what I missed.
For sure.
Nice. I'm good too. So I'm happy that we can continue on, and I apologize for anybody that does have to hop off. But yeah, I think these are great conversations, and so I'm really happy that we can continue on. So I'll move over to the next question. And this question is, should we let AI create alt text? I don't know if you heard what just came in the chat, but I agree with it. Someone said no with a lot of O's.
Yeah. This is Lyssa. Don't let AI loose in the wild. You can use AI to create your alt text and then check in and see how well it does and what you would add. If you need it as a starting point, sure. But the human finish is what's important.
This is Dave. This is going to evolve. I mean, I partially agree with Lyssa, but it'll get better. Generated alt text is probably better than none. Just in the past week or two, some stuff has come out and gone around the disability community and other places, which is like AI description of videos, which you can interact with and ask questions and all that. And some of it's pretty amazing. So I think we need to be a little bit tolerant here and know that things are going to change.
Yeah, this is Lyssa. That's fair enough, Dave.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I personally am a little bit sick of hearing about AI, so I was hesitant to put a question in here because I feel like everything's AI, but you're right. It's here.
Well, there's some amazing stuff out there, Lyssa, so, it's just, we're going to have to work it through. And
I agree.
we're getting a lot more than we used to. We wouldn't have been able to have this conversation 10 or 20 years ago.
I completely agree. And I don't know, I was going to ask you specifically, and you mentioned a second ago about the it's better maybe to have generated alt text than none at all. So doesn't Google have a feature in their Chrome browser that adds alt text if there is none there?
They may, I can't remember, but some screen readers are doing that too. And so there's just a bunch going on.
Yeah, which is really, really neat. And I hope that we can, my Luddite tendency aside, I suppose, we've had a lot of presentations, requests come in, for AI things. And I'm like, oh no, it seems like it's so hard to talk about. So that's where my grumpiness comes from, I suppose. But yeah, I do really love that there are some really good things about it and we can use it. And I will say we do coach people when we're training on Microsoft Office products in particular. There's a checkbox back in your settings that allows you to turn off the automatic description. So at first, when the automatic description came out, the accessibility checker in Microsoft Office was not saying, hey, this is automatically generated, you should go check it manually. And they have since changed that. So even as I was putting this presentation together, it was auto-generating alt text, but then it would say or remind me, hey, this was auto-generated, go check it out and make sure it's accurate. So that is a really, really good change. So it's like they're kind of meshing the best of both worlds. Like you're having it there and described, but you still have the reminder to go check it so that it's not just left there and you can make sure the context is right. And someone earlier in the chat did say, but is it going to get the context right? And I don't know if AI can ever read my mind, then I guess I'm going to be scared. That's when I'm actually going to be scared. But in some cases, I'm sure it can get the context really well, or really accurate if it's reading everything around it and all of that. But somebody I learned a lot from in accessibility, he would always use the example of I can't remember what year, but back when the North Korean and South Korean leaders met, and it was like a momentous occasion, and all the auto-generated alt text was something along the lines of, two men hugging. So it wasn't actually giving enough context on its own, unless there was an article next to it that kind of let people know that this was like a really big deal. So, go back to it depends. We don't know what context would have been around that image, but I think it would be really hard for AI to figure out that that was what was going on in that picture and say that out loud. Yeah. Okay, I'm checking that chat to see if there was anything. Somebody did say Microsoft PowerPoint automatically describes the alt text, so you have seen that. And again, I hope it's reminding you to go back and check that and make sure it's accurate and really gets the point across. And one thing I didn't really touch on, but we've kind of touched on it in various times, the content creator is really going to know why they put that image in there. So, one minor point I'll add that I haven't is, if you're not the content creator, it's really important that you go figure out what that image is being put in there for. Or if you're having people add, give you content to add to a social media post or something like that, have them send over the description that they want. Because that is, that's going to be, they're the people that know why they put it in there, and they're going to be able to help you out with that context. It's really, really important that you know that going in. Otherwise, you're just making a guess if you're not the person who owns that content.
There's been a question in the chat a couple times about overlays, and I'm not quite sure I understand it.
Button overlays. So is this a button that is on top of an image? Okay.
You would need to be able to get to the button with your keyboard, and it would probably need some kind of alt text or something so that you knew what it was. So I would say it's just a place you'd have to be really careful.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of examples of this. So if this is an example that's like yours, let me know. If not, also let me know. But we see the buttons a lot on like hero images. So like on the top of a website, there will be an image that spans across the entirety of the top of the page. And then there will be a button, like a call to action kind of button on top of it. Is that the kind of case you're talking about? Okay, so what I see a lot, whether this is right or not, is those images are marked as decorative. So again, whether or not it should be, it's questionable. So I don't know, Dave or Lisa, do you
Well,
have?
and you get into whether it's a, it might be seen as a background image, which means it would pretty much be ignored.
Exactly. And that's what I've mainly seen. So Tanya's saying that she's seeing Wave catches them as errors. So if they were built, if they were added as images and then they weren't given alt text, then that's probably going to be an error. And they would need to have alt text put on them.
And Wave has to do something, and Wave has rules that it says, are you meeting these rules? And yes or no. Well, that part of it. But the question is, can a disabled person use this? Can you get to the button with your keyboard? Can you know what it's for? And so just remember, in all these things, is a disabled person able to use this? Because that's the most important thing, not whether it meets WCAG 2.3.1 or whatever.
I completely agree. Inclusion over compliance, right? All right, and also too, Tanya, that is a great thing. You can ask, I'll share our contact information, but if you have a specific case, we're always happy to help out. And I'm sure the other folks on this call would be too, if there's a specific case you want to work through. We're happy to help, because we can't necessarily cover all cases or all bases in this kind of presentation. If there's something really wonky you feel like you're dealing with, let us know and we can try to get that answered for you.
I don't have many opinions, but I'll try.
It has no opinions. Okay. Awesome. Well, I think that we can go to the next question. I'm still trying to be mindful of time, so not maybe going too far over our time, because we really have this one last question and then some key takeaways, and then I guess we'll cut it off. But all right, so this is the decorative thing. So this actually kind of follows just what we were talking about in the chat a little bit. But what, if anything, should actually be marked as decorative? So Dave, you may have missed it, but I know you knew what I was kind of presenting on. But when we're talking about decorative images, like, would you prefer that most things are not marked as decorative, or is there any stuff that you would just really say this should be decorative 100% of the time?
Well, some stuff I think is obviously decorative, like borders, and things like that. When we were talking and putting this together, we talked about, well, if it's a separator, is that decorative, or does that give you useful information? Well, it could be both, or either. So, it's like everything else. There's no absolutes, but is it what, we generally call eye candy? Is it there just because of how it looks? Then that's decorative, and I don't want to know about it. But other people will say, I want to know everything on the page. And so there isn't a right or wrong answer here.
Yeah, this is Lisa. I would agree with that, and it's such a fine line between, because I really enjoy learning about design elements and how things are laid out, and kind of visual decisions people make, and I mean, it helps me understand for my own work, etc. But it also takes up more of my time. So brevity is just always key. So the line, it just lets me know there's a line there. Oh, that's interesting. Good, blah blah blah, and I can move on quick. So if you choose to describe buttons that have images on them, like click the barking dog. So then if it just says barking dog button, then that's quick and easy to click, etc. So if you describe design elements to make those descriptions as short as possible.
Like that. So it seems like if it's really maybe decorative, keep it short, especially in that case.
Yeah, and certainly there's lots of places where just hiding them is fine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. I There's a question in the Q&A that I think is a really good example. So earlier in the presentation, we had pictures of each of us and our names below them. So would you consider those decorative because they're kind of duplicating the information that's below them? Or would we describe those? So I'll tell you what I chose to do. I put in for Dave, I think it was your headshot. So I put in headshot. I put in me kind of with my dog, something about that. And then Lyssa with her cat, some details about that. I can't remember exactly what I said, but and I'll also add one more thing. But I had a conversation at a conference one time, and someone actually said that they had they preferred to have it noted or to have alt text on images of people next to their names, because then they may want to take that image and use it elsewhere, copy it somewhere or do something else with it, or just know that there was a representation of that person aside or next to their name. So what are your thoughts on that? Start with Lyssa. Your mic's unmuted, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah. I like the way I like the way you did it. I agree with that. And someone had a question about logos on slides. I don't think I would mark them as decorative. I think I would just mark them as logo. And again, that gives me a little information, lets me know, oh, somebody chose to put a logo on every slide.
Well, I'll ask the question, Lyssa. If it was on every slide, would you just do it the first time or every slide? Personally, I wouldn't want it to know on every slide, but other people might. There isn't a right answer.
Right.
So the
I mean, that's
intent
right.
of the creator is of some importance.
Yeah. I mean, to me, if it was just if you just put it on the first slide, said logo on the first slide, and then hit it on the other ones, then I would just assume that it's not there on the other ones, and then I feel like that's misleading.
Well, yeah, but it's still taking my airtime.
Right. No, you're right.
So like I said, there's not a right answer. So
yeah.
do what you want. You'll take your hit somewhere. So
that's the take your hit somewhere. I mean, I feel like, and we've got a summary slide coming up, so I think I may just move to that because I think it actually touches on what you just mentioned. But the last point here is on the takeaway slide is people may give feedback on your descriptions. Use this as a learning opportunity. So we're all trying our best here. You're going to take a hit somewhere, like Dave said. So we can look at it either way, like use this as a learning opportunity, do your best. And most of the time people are going to be happy that you're trying to give them a good experience, right? Rather than angry that you didn't do it the exact way that they prefer. Because a lot of what goes into this is preference, we deal with this a lot on color. So color contrast is a huge issue. We see this on every site we evaluate almost. And some of it comes down to you're not meeting the ratio. And some of it's like, well, this color looks bad when I put it above the ratio. Well, I don't know. We have designers kind of talk through all sorts of different issues when it comes to color. And I feel like I'm not nailing this one like I want to, but it's up for, it's just like a designer may have an idea of something, really want to do it, and there's an accessibility barrier with it. And some people may really like it and some people may really hate it. Either way, you're just not going to make everybody happy. So I think, using it as a learning opportunity, making sure you're accepting of feedback, it's really, really important. All right. And any other final thoughts on that one before I kind of wrap up, do the takeaways? All right. So the takeaways, the rest of them are that all images really need a description unless they are truly decorative, which we all just discovered is, and it depends sort of thing. So just do your best. If you really think that it's something somebody would want to skip and it would be absolutely pointless for them to hear, you can make that decision as long as the tool lets you make it decorative, mark it as decorative. This was Lyssa's point, kind of as we're preparing for this, less is often more. So we want to make sure we're not overloading someone's ears, but while making sure we're still really getting that context across and that sentiment that we're trying to, like the reason why we put this image in, we're trying to make sure that's getting across without just overwhelming and overloading. And of course, we've said this before, describing images is an art, not a science. So, this is something I learned about, or I learned some new things in this presentation here today, which was the whole point of this. We wanted to kind of make it more of a conversation. So you have some tips and tricks on how to kind of think through describing your images, but you can see there's still room for you to grow. I know I can always improve on writing my image descriptions. Now, I'm still happy to stay for Q&A, so I've got a slide up here for that, but also I put up the resources for getting in touch, so you can contact the Minnesota. I'm sorry, I actually meant to change that. Sorry, Amy. So we might want to put the right one in, but you can, I think it's the accessibility line, but you really want to get in touch with Amy's group. The Assistive, so that's the website, and then I have our email address down there. I'll pop those in the chat.
Thanks, Lyssa. There was one question early on, and I did tell that individual we'd talk about it at the end. So if that person's still on, they can hear it now. But they said they are creating a visual art portfolio website. Do you have any tips on providing alt text on artwork, since it is such a huge part of the website and it can be difficult to describe?
That is a really tough case. Dave, I see you're unmuting, so I'll let you start.
Yeah, I think that might be an opportunity where you have links to longer descriptions, because you would want to go into some detail and probably do it with a person who knows about art, could say meaningful things. I mean, if the point of the website is pictures and art, I think an alt text is too limiting.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't see how you could describe art briefly, but
I mean, you could, but it would just, you see the Mona Lisa and you say picture of woman, well, it's right, but it doesn't really tell you anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's going to be this resource in the guide too, and I might go try to find it here in a second to pop it in the chat for you specifically, but it's well, if you're still on, but it's the Diagram Center, and they have a few examples that may at least help you get some ideas of how you could describe some art, because they try to cover those really hard corner cases. We used a lot of their influence when we were building the course that we put together. Because that art's one of the harder things, and we've gotten questions in the past since some of the work we do is with universities, like if a piece of art is used as on a test, and part of the answer is relying on you looking at the image and then answering it based on what you see. Well, are we going to give away the answer if we write it in such a way and describe it in such a way in the alt text and the extra description? I know we've had that question. Honestly, it's been really hard to answer depending upon the case. So sometimes we've had to really get creative, and we rely a lot on that person who owns that content to kind of walk through what they're trying to get at. And kind of
we go through this a lot, like with high schools with high stakes testing, where they might have an image and you had to, or I remember this with the SAT, you had to pull something out of it. So it'd have a picture of a rolling chair and it would say, which way is this chair moving? Well, and so you could have a lot of information in the alt text, but it's probably going to give it away. So you need an alternate measure. It's not it wouldn't be a valid way of testing some disabled people.
Mm-hmm.
We used to have to go, and they still do, I think, go through all the high stakes testing and flag those things that just didn't work in a certain context.
Interesting. So you basically had to come up with a completely alternate accommodation situation.
Yeah. Well, accommodation might be the right word, or it just a completely different test item for that one item to show that they had knowledge of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it requires some creativity, and we didn't really talk too much about tactile graphics, but some of the charts and graphs and things like that can be represented that way too. So there's some other modalities that you can always think of, I mean, we're talking about art right now, but again, we're just kind of riffing at this point. I think it's, you know, it's always important to sort of think through a little out of the box and figure out maybe what other ways you could get the same point across.
Just to add, there's some terrific examples out there of descriptions of art that are, and I can't think of any off the top of my head, but maybe we'll try and find them, that do a really good job of showing exactly what a camera would see. And so not being too subjective, but also being detailed enough so that a person could really get a sense of what other viewers are seeing.
And lately, we've seen some good descriptions of astronomy things from NASA and others, because there's been a lot of new material in that area from that big telescope. I'm forgetting the name. I'm a big old guy, but you know.
Plus, the sun's been really busy lately.
That too, yeah. It's busy every day, Lyssa.
It's been doing some extra cool things though, huh? All right, so we have one more question in the chat, in the Q&A, so I'll read this off real quick. What are your recommendations regarding alt text when the image is very general and does not relate specifically to the written content alongside it? Example, add copy about opening a bank account accompanied by a photo of a man sipping coffee.
Some of that sounds decorative to me.
I feel like that was my first inclination too, but again, I don't like relying on my or the experts here. Lyssa, do you have an opinion on that one?
I mean, I think I would just keep it short and quick so that I know that there's something stupid there. Man sipping coffee. Yeah, I don't know.
So I guess we're coming back to that. Either mark it as decorative or just keep it really short. Man sipping coffee. Like that answer. All right. Any other questions while we're here? Looks like I think we covered all the ones I saw in the chat. There were quite a few coming in, but did we miss any, Amy or Courtney?
This is Amy. I think we're good, and I think we need to wrap it up. Our ASL interpreter is probably exhausted.
Put another quarter in the meter.
Her hands probably don't agree.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I didn't mean for her. I just meant in general. I don't mean to.
Well, this has been amazing. And again, for all of you that have stayed on through the whole hour and almost a half now, we will be sending you out credits for your attendance, and we will probably in a week or two have the webinar up posted to our Facebook and YouTube channels. So wonderful topic, and you three have been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and Dave and Lyssa, thank you so much for playing along. I learned so much each time.
Yeah.
Much appreciate it.